with Bruce Maybe of Managing Partners LLC. So I would say, Bruce, why don't you kick it off? Maybe start with a little bit of a bio, quick bio, and then we'll get right into the presentation.
Well, first, let's see if the technical end of this is working. Are you? I'm hoping that you're now seeing my slideshow,
We're good.
and you're probably actually seeing my PowerPoint.
Yeah, you need to click on the yes, show my screen. Something popped up.
Okay, I did that.
Okay, now we're seeing your PowerPoint. Yep, and you can make that bigger on your screen there. But yep,
Okay.
we're looking at it.
You're going to see a little bit of PowerPoint, and you're going to see a little bit of my notes, and that's just the way it works today.
Hey, Bruce, on the upper right-hand side, very upper right-hand side, you'll see 3 icons at the very top up there on the right. So we'll take your cursor all the way up to the top. All the way to over to now go to the left. And you see those 3 little icons, the X, to the left of the X, click on that. To the X there on the right hand of the box, to the left of the X. No, over to your left. You see that X? Don't click on the X, click on the thing next to the X, to the left.
I don't see an X.
You see an X right there where you can X out the whole, see your cursor is right next to it. There's an X. And see right there, click on the thing.
The icon in the middle.
Not that. You wanted to click on the other item next to the X.
From where my cursor is, which direction should I
Go
go?
right. The icon right in the middle, right to the left of the X there.
This one?
Nope.
That one?
Nope. Go back over. I'm sorry. No, you got it. You were right in the right spot. Move your cursor over to the left. So I'm sorry, everybody. He's having technical difficulties. We've been trying to get this worked out. Get your cursor over to right. Move your cursor to the left some more. Move it some more. Move it, move it, move it, move it, move it. Stop. Go down a little bit. Over to the left a little bit. Over to the right a little bit. That little middle. No, go up. That right there. Click.
Right there?
On that, you see where you'll see something there. If you're not seeing it, I guess we'll have to abandon this. So, it's one of those icons there that makes the full screen. So go ahead and go with what we got.
Let's go with innovation. And I want to, just before, John, I give a little bit of my bio, I'd like to give a little bit about the innovation situation that I think we're in. And there's a picture here. And this picture, if you'll notice, is not brand new because innovation has been here for a long time. This is how an artist from way back in France was looking forward to the year 2000. They thought this was what innovation was going to be about. It's not that way. A real important reason why I believe this session is important, for me at least, is that I believe organization development and change management has a whole lot to do with where design thinking, where innovation is going. I believe that we are the ones, I call it we're the generation, that actually will be creating and already are creating new ways of innovating. So that's the excitement for me here. If you believe that this is a time when the economy is going to get better, it's also a time when businesses start to invest in innovation, which to me is an extra incentive to get involved in it. Let me talk a little bit about me, as John asked. I started as a student, and I was in industrial design. That was back in the 1960s. And at that point, it was all about creativity. We were supposed to be super designers, super creative, but they had things called human interface and a lot of psychology, but it really wasn't very human compared to the way it is today. And I had to go through a lot of other fields that included social work, that included social change, group dynamics, and it wasn't until 1974 that I discovered organization development. And that challenge has not gone away. The challenge of having innovation fit with the human element of that, and both ways on that. The design fields are trying to get more and more human, and I believe the OD world can help them. As you can probably see right here, I've been in organization development for 35 years, And I'm still often trying to sneak in the OD parts. I'm also often having to sneak in the innovation parts because I believe innovation is so much different. But this is not new. And if any of you have been around long enough to remember when Billy Albin gave the keynote presentation at the OD Network back in 1980, she said, we need to do some things differently. What if we could learn organization development instead of in schools? We could learn by practicing on real issues like, and she named the Chicago school system. Richard Beckard, and I'm sure most of us know his name, he did a keynote called Who Needs Us? And I literally remember the audience struggling to breathe when he suggested that an organization development intervention, a good one, is to fire the top executives. And Peter Sorensen, Therese Jaeger, the new ISOD, they are all moving toward and getting us involved in global OD. If you've been seeing any media these days, you might be frustrated, as I am, with the barrage of innovation and innovative. And I think the latest one for me is I've seen some kind of innovative laundry detergent. Now, in fact, there are a lot of great new innovative products, but too much of this for me is slick packaging. What it tells me, though, what I think it helps reinforce for all of us, is that innovation is indeed important these days. And I bring up the question, what about that innovation itself is changing? The example I like to give is my own house. I counted. There are about 80 light bulbs in my house, and most of them now are LED. And I ask myself, how did that happen? And the answer, for those of you who've been following the news, the answer is Alibaba. That the Chinese eBay company is why my house is full of LEDs. I'm a cheapskate, so I was unwilling 2 years ago to pay $20 a bulb when I could get it on Alibaba for $3 to $4 a bulb. My point here, and this is to me where I think one of the huge changes is, the innovation was in the larger system. It wasn't the light bulb alone that got us to do things differently. And so I'm wanting to get into that today. How does that larger system change? How is that innovating? This is the agenda, and it's a tight one anyway, even without my technical glitch. The plan is to start with innovation, to look at some of the simple changes that I think are profound within the fields of innovation, within the roles that are played with innovation. Secondly, to look more specifically at the design process and how that is changing, and there are a couple of really critical new dimensions. I want to get briefly into what's listed here as a wicked business case. Wicked as in things don't go the way they're supposed to, as an example of how innovation, I think, often happens. And let's get started. Just before I get started, I want to point out that this really is focused on you, I hope. And as it says, I am not promising to give a comprehensive overview of design or design process. I want to give enough introduction to design process that those of you who are not in the design world can actually take some pieces, begin applying them. Those of you who are in the design world, these, I hope, are pieces that are different than the ones you've been most commonly using. Okay, the slide. Innovation. Where is innovation going? And I want to look at starting with the way I was trained as a designer. We were supposed to think out of the box. We're supposed to look at the whole system, think pragmatically, come up with designs that really serve the larger picture. And so design thinking, as that's evolved in the last 10, 15 years, I think in very simple terms, design thinking to me means just getting the regular business leaders and business teams to think like a designer. And that if we can do that, it expands the innovation. And of course, the key principle is that innovation is supposed to be creating breakthroughs, not solving little problems, not putting out little fires. And to do that, one of the key principles is we have little fires and we can't put them out right away. We have to use them as opportunities. So to move onward, I want to first start looking at examples of innovation. Have you heard about, have you read about these? The big green maglev train. You've certainly heard about Elon Musk because he started PayPal, because you drive a Tesla and he's in charge of Tesla Motors. He's been in the news most recently with SpaceX, almost collaborating with NASA to take over. Elon Musk came up with this design. It isn't implemented yet, but if you and I are able to get on this train, we go from New York to LA. This is the prediction, 45 minutes. My calculation, that's 4,000 miles per hour. How do you do that? If we were to get in our car, if we were to get in any of our trains and go 4,000 miles per hour, we'd literally burn up. Well, Musk is creating vacuum tubes underground. So he sucks all the air out so the train can go that fast. It's amazing. He's not alone. When we look at Jeff Bezos and what Amazon is doing to the world, when we look at Grace Hopper, and I want to bring up Grace Hopper because too often the women that are the innovators don't get acknowledged. But she began the software compiling revolution and as I understand it, coined the term bug in the software. Virginia Apgar, John just has, not John, Steve just has a new baby that he's watching, and he may be familiar with the Apgar method by Virginia Apgar. But it's big. And when we look at many of the innovations today, a lot of them we can do because of the internet. PayPal, Bitcoin, many kinds of crowdsourcing, and as I'm struggling with the technology today, webinars. I believe webinars are a huge scale technology that is changing the world. And the more we look at these macro changes, the more I start to question, is that all there is? And this is where I believe the larger change might be happening. I like to call them small innovations. And I happen to fly Southwest Airlines a lot. If any of you fly Southwest Airlines, you recognize these aluminum pillars. And the aluminum pillars, not very high tech. They look pretty good, but these pillars, by the fact that they are there and that we line up behind them, gets us on our airplanes massively faster than it used to be, gets our airplanes to fly on time, saves us millions of dollars, and at least in the past, it used to save us a lot of money on Southwest. But it's a simple, low-tech kind of a solution. For me, bicycles are another one. I actually will be meeting with a client tonight who's in the business of using the lowly bicycle to change how third world economies operate their transportation. I won't get into that right now, but they are looking at, they take junk bikes around at least Chicago and other cities they're expanding to. They're using the money that they make on fixing and selling old bikes to send thousands of bikes into other continents. That's small innovation. It's huge, but it's not high tech. If you have examples of other small types of innovation, I would appreciate if you start posting them. We may not get time today to look at what you're posting, but if it's up there, we will be able to read each other's posts, and I have a hunch that you are seeing small just like I am. So let's take another poll here. Steve and John did not ask this one. What I would like you to do is rate yourself as an innovator. Oops, I'd say I have to apologize. Don't fall for this one. The purpose of putting that question up there was hoping some of you would fall for it and wonder whether you're an innovator or not. And some of you would say, yes, I am. And some of you would say, oh, but I'm not. I can't even draw. And that, I believe, is the wrong question. I'm hoping, and I believe we are starting to do this, not just focusing on what I'm calling the movie stars of innovation. I have to admit that I came to this by realizing that I am not one of the genius designers. When I look around my house, I find over 200 designs, 200 little innovations that I have done, and not one of them has made me a rich man. Where I have ended up using my career is what I know about innovation and the practice of doing it. I've been able to help a lot of other people do, and that's where I believe the fact that I'm not an innovator in that way is the good news. These people matter. I do miss Steve Jobs. I really like what Jeff Bezos is doing. I like the many things that were coming, that Elon Musk is doing. The women of innovation. This is not an either or. We need them, and I think this is the newer rising question, we have to get more people, drastically more people, into the small innovation. So that's where I'm going to go with this. It's the who else question. And this is a question not of who is the big innovator, but who helps make the innovation happen. I'm just about to put up 3 roles that I have found essential. Users. That's now often the centerpiece of the design thinking world. That users are getting respect, users are brought in early, users are surveyed, but less attention is being given to the catalyst. The catalyst, the person who makes the innovation happen, who pulls together the designers, who pulls in the users, who gets the users to be open. That catalyst is a role that I say the people in the organization development world, we are the stars there. We've been trained, we're good at it, we can do it on a large scale. And that's where I'm hoping many of you who are on the call today will start to, you probably aren't just starting to, you're continuing to play that catalyst role, with it being a core role in the design world. I want to look into the design process, and I'm doing my best to represent design as a fundamental innovation process. So what I'm going to take a few minutes to do is get into that process, and many people in the design thinking world discuss the innovation process as a problem-solving kind of a process. You know the steps. The identify the problem, define the problem, analyze the causes, come up with some options, come up with a solution, implement, evaluate. That problem-solving process is the fundamental, but it's being changed because there are some new twists. The big twists in the design world is that we're not looking at one problem. We're looking at multiple problems, we're looking at messy problems, and we're looking at the opportunity side. So how does that change this problem-solving process? First, the client or the owner of the problem gives us a brief, gives us a spec and say, this is what we're looking for. And then we go out and do some research. There's nothing new about that. In the design world, the first big deviation happens with the word diverge. And the divergence This is something that I was floored by when I was in design school. When my professors told me, we need to break out of the box, could you start with about 100 very different sketches? And I knew that I was in a different world. That is changing further these days as the designers are literally trying to live with the clients, not studying them, not doing research about them, but going to live in the worlds where those clients live. That is a change. And the one example is a consultant who literally lives with the family of the people whose innovation he's trying to create. Okay, where does it go from diverge? We have 100 or 200 wild ideas. Next piece, the design process, the fundamental is transform. How do we take that huge set of very different out-of-the-box ideas and now begin to pull them together into something worth testing? Calling it transform, as in we bring it down to a few practical kinds of options, and this is where we want to get the drawings, the charts, the analysis, because we want something that we're going to test. And that's the third piece. And this is where, in my background, the design that I was taught was called engineering emphasis, and the engineers were far better than I was at doing the testing, running the numbers, finding out what really works. So that's the process. If you put it all together, diverge, transform, converge. Here's the question. What comes before that? And if you are having any chance to post, I'd appreciate some thoughts. In about a minute, I'm going to put up one piece that I see from the design world about what comes before diverge. Here goes. You might see something familiar here. Unfreeze, change, refreeze. Kurt Lewin came up with that a long time ago. The idea, before anybody is going to be getting out of the box, we need to unfreeze. We need to get unstuck from wherever we are stuck mentally, physically, emotionally, and I think that becomes one of the first major contributions of the organization development world and change to the design world, because we do this well. So, what comes before unfreeze? This is where the design world has moved drastically, where I feel like I'm proud of it, I'm glad to be part of it. It's that empathy level that's becoming the center. It's often called the user experience. But before we do any diverging, before we do any unfreezing, we have to get the stakeholders to be involved in this. And that's something, like I say, we do better in OD than most any other profession. You seen this commercial? So which is better, the simple or the complicated? And I tend to like the kids' answer. If we're going to make design and innovation highly human, and that's the intent, it has to be simple. And this is, for me, what I've come to. Those of you who are here in the design world, you may have a different 3 words. Hopefully you don't have 16 words. But the 3 words for me: engage the stakeholders, explore wildly, and then test it severely. That, to me, is something simple. It's something my clients can understand. There's another question. Are you ready? If this makes better, what makes better yet? And better yet is really what I'm looking for. If you take the box from the last slide and you squeeze it down and put it on the left, that's where we borrow from the Agile software world, or accelerated change, or rapid prototyping, newer versions of continuous improvement. And so the question gets to be, when we do one design, finish it, learn from it, and then repeat the process, how long should that take? How many months? And the newer version of design is not saying how many months, it's saying how many times. How many times do we repeat the design process? Or they call it diving deeper. Some examples. How many months does it typically take for a prototype to be developed? Google Glass is one that I Googled, and you can do it too. It wasn't weeks. The first prototype of Google Glass, 1 day. When we look at what Boeing is doing with the vertical takeoff Phantom jets, how many months? 1 month from the idea being hatched to a plane flying. And I think it's this kind of scale that's truly agile, truly rapid iteration, and this is, for me, the kind of scale we need to be having. In a couple minutes, actually less, I want to open this up for some questions. One more point I want to make, though, is that a silent ingredient that allows this rapid iteration, that allows us to be human and agile, is that there's also a very big change in what learning means. Learning used to mean, and too often it still does mean, that somebody who knows, the expert or the teacher, they have the proven solution and they're going to enlighten the rest of us. One version of learning. The other, we're all in this together. We're fellow explorers. We're in a new situation. Nobody has all the answers, so we're going to learn together. And that is where innovation begins to change. Okay, let me open this up, and I am unable to see the chat room. So I'm going to ask John and Steve, as you bring up the questions, let's give it a little bit of time and see what has been coming up.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bruce. So I'll go through a couple reactions and things that are in the chat room right now.
Great.
And for everybody out there, either in the GoToWebinar questions panel or in the Chatsy alternate chat room, go ahead and put in your reactions and your questions that you have thus far. And I'll read you a couple, Bruce, right now. Dr. Lynn Bourget says hello. She also said that she likes to add in the OD perspective and skills without labeling it, and that makes all the difference. For her, she also asked if you were aware of the book Nudge from the University of Chicago that talks about shaping behavior via design.
I'm aware of the book, but I would love to hear more input about it. I frankly have not read it, and I would love to hear some of the principles. The nudge principles, I believe, are exactly on the same plane as small innovation. It's not about the breakthrough. It's about, and this is where I hope you'll correct me if I'm wrong, it's the breakthroughs on one hand, but thousands of little nudges. So we'll check me on that one. So that's my reaction to nudge.
Okay. And then Anne, she put in that microloans were small innovations with a big impact.
In Africa, third world countries, if that's what she's talking about, absolutely. Same track where innovations in some cases are much more profound in the very poor countries than in the richest countries in the world. And I think we have something to learn from that. So thanks for bringing that one.
Yeah. Katie Barnett said that in response to the question about what comes before diverge, she said the desire to unfreeze. There needs to be a need. There needs to be a need. She said that's what comes first.
Do you have some of my clients? I can't hear her answer, but I know that is a huge challenge, that if there's no desire to change, no desire to unfreeze, the psychologist has been saying that for 50 years. No one's going to change. So thank you for putting that one in.
Yeah, and Dr. Lynn came in again. She said that this is why she designed her positive transformational leadership systems 30 years ago with engine and four-wheel systems. She said it's simple and clients love it. She also said that she loves the speed of design now. When she started her work, she had no idea how fast or easily change would implement or it would go. And then she also agreed with what you said about nudge. It is about the small innovations. Each are very powerful in shaping behavior. And then Katie, who asked the question about having the desire to unfreeze, she smiled when you asked if she had any of your clients.
She's
And
admitted.
then there's one question in here from Roberta. It says, how do you see the Agile Manifesto leaping into design with an OD perspective?
Well, I'm going to go back to a previous slide on that one, and I'm looking at this as my interpretation of the Agile Manifesto. It's the idea that yes, we're going to do learn, test, repeat, improve, but that where it really breaks free, and this is where I look at especially large system interventions in an OD sense. If you look at where it says deeper stakeholder engagement, if you look at that little blue arrow, it points to what some people call take a break. That is, okay, we've tried this a couple of times, we made it better, hopefully we maybe even made it worse, but now let's step back, let's get more people who are highly effective, actively involved, and try to get them to create a new ground floor so that we go back at it again with them more deeply engaged than we did the first time. So that's my sense of it.
Hey, Bruce.
Any more, or is it time
I
to
have
move?
a question.
There's one more.
I had one question, and John, you can wrap up.
Yeah, and then there's one more, Steve.
Yeah. So
yeah, that sounds good. Steve, why don't you ask yours, and then I'll ask the last one from John.
Thanks. Could you go back to that slide on the time for rapid prototyping? Could you explain that just a teeny bit more, or just a little bit more, in terms of, did they come up with the idea and design the prototype in one day? I have a story. I heard the story about when Chrysler went back into doing convertibles, and Iacocca was sitting in the room, and the people he said, "How long will it take you to make a convertible?" And they said, "Oh, it'll take 3 months." He said, "No, I mean like today. How long today?" And they go, "What do you mean?" Just go cut off the top of a car and drive around in it. So can you give me a sense of this your sequence that you set up, the diverge, converge? Where are you talking about that time of like 1 day, 1 month? Could you go back to those examples about the one for Google Glass 1 day, for the plane 1 month, that kind of thing? Could you go back and just a little bit more around those?
Sure. And I'm leaving this slide up because the ideal that I almost never get is that right on the left side of that slide, we have a bunch of people involved and engaged from the beginning, and we're all the Lee Iacocas. It's Lee and his team, and a lot of other people are saying, we need a convertible today. But that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen almost ever, at least not to me. Good luck to those of you if it does. Instead, what usually happens to me is I'm like this blue arrow. I'm brought into the picture, and you're brought into the picture after much history has happened. So we're brought in, and this is some of my favorite work. I brought in after the mess is made. And it's at that point that if we have our head on straight and there's a mess going on all around us, we can say, let's do an innovation today. In fact, I just realized it. You have done a good setup for the case that we're supposed to get into next.
Okay, cool. Could you
do that?
Yeah. Could you just repeat the examples? You said Google Glass was 1 day. What was the other one?
Well, the example here of the Boeing Phantom Swift is 1 month. The idea that somebody said we ought to do this, and a month later they were actually trying one out. And Steve, you gave some great other examples, even going way back to Lee Iacocca and the first convertible. What I think has changed is not the fact that goes on, but it's the frequency. And if you see some of my own examples here down with Walgreens and Motorola, working bikes that I've been describing, Sargent and Lundy, a nuclear engineer, these are places that are large scale often, that are facing messes, that are now more and more skipping the idea of we have to take 3 months and develop something really good, or 6 months. They're saying, what can we do this week? What can we do today? And often I work with Walgreens, and we have them come up with their next strategic plan at the business unit level by what we call tomorrow morning. We're joking. We really mean any time in the next 3 days.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. And John has one more question, and then I think you can jump into your case.
Okay, John?
Yep, this one is from John Cooper. It says, how does innovation align, conflict, or maybe just not relate to classic OD values?
Good. Challenging question. Classic OD values. And so I think of values as in humanism. I see high alignment. Values as in group involvement and group dynamics. I see absolute alignment. Classic. This is where we get into T groups and forget about large system intervention and systemic on a large scale. I think the big change in OD, moving from looking at the team level, individual level, to now starting often looking at the systems level, the large systems level, that might be a contradiction, not to traditional OD values, but just to traditional OD practice. I think OD has moved way past that. Get into the case?
Yep.
Too many questions. I wish we could spend all day on this. I love it. This case, I'm going to hit briefly. It's called a wicked case because things went really bad. And the way I like to do this, we won't have really the time to do this, and I'll take the blame. But the way I like to do this is present what I was presented with, and then ask, okay, you're in my position, what will you do? It comes from a book, and you can see the book on the slide. By the way, I find that the wicked cases are the ones that really make innovations. The nice, smooth, well-presented cases, nah, usually nothing much really changes. Here goes. The client came to me with this upper right quote. We are developing the next generation in computer chip, the silicon chip, but our machine just crashed. And when it crashed, it created about $1.5 million of scrap, unrecoverable scrap, in just a few minutes. So the client went on. This is the top manager of the facility. Can you help us with strategic planning? Now, I assume that some of you are scratching your head, which is what I did. Why would they want strategic planning when they have this crisis? And if you can see my little quote down there, the top manager said, well, we have been trying for several years to get our group to be agile, to communicate, to collaborate, and nothing much has worked. So the fact that our machine is a disaster today could open us up. It could. He did not use the word unfreeze, but that's what he was thinking. I like this guy. So that's what happened. I liked him. I said, I'll take it. What would be a good next step? And I'm going to show you in a minute. I'm sure you're thinking of your next step. Here's where we started. We started with the idea of how do we engage and explore with the supervisors. So there was a Band-Aid put on the machine that they couldn't allow that to go on without going out of business. But they had some engineers get the machine working. But the huge debate was, to what extent should we strong-arm the fixing of the machines, and to what extent should we actively, for once, engage our supervisors in helping figure out what to do? The supervisors heard about this. The word leaked out while we were having our powwow of top management, and the supervisors began resenting the idea that they were going to be involved or engaged. They had something that they already wanted. They sent in 14 demands. If you want to engage us, start addressing these demands. Okay. I'm going to tell you, because of our time here, that the top management group agreed to go with those demands. And they ended up having a powwow of all 80 supervisors, and there were 5 different plans that were developed in a 3-day period with all 80 supervisors and all top managers. One of those plans was the biggest of all, and that was to completely change the configuration of where people sat. Take the top managers out of their offices, put them in the middle, give them cubicles, allow everybody to communicate. That was the solution. So, how do you think it came out? The way it came out, just before our test was over, we were going to test in 6 weeks. 5 weeks, I got the bad news. Nobody, and I bet some of you realize this, nobody is coming out to talk to the top managers. They're sitting in the middle, totally embarrassed. So the question is, what do we do with this? This was now a double disaster. We had not fixed the machines in any significant way. We had made a change in the facility, and it was a social system bomb. It didn't work. If any of you are thinking what you would do, I'm going to give you just a second or two to type it in if you're doing that, or at least to think about it for yourself. Okay, all the time you get. What the top management group with a few supervisors and me agreed to do is admit it. This was bad. It didn't work. We don't know what to do next. Let's talk. So they reconvened the supervisors and the top managers who all agreed, it was a consensus, let's just undo what we did. Let's just put the offices back where they were. That didn't fix it. But that is what fixed it. It was when, and this came from the supervisors, from many of them as we surveyed them, what changed the culture in that couple of weeks was when the top managers admitted it wasn't working. They had invested, listened to the supervisors, gone along with it, invested money, and when it didn't work, they shared the blame. That changed the culture. That allowed, and this is fast forward, over the next few months, what turned out to be over the next few years, together they were now able as never before to deal with the really angry customers. They had many angry customers. But further, they had a culture of trust that started rapidly. It was not by design, it was not by plan, but it really inculcated the entire, first, the plant itself, and then it began to expand into their markets, into the internal processes of their company. So, short version, I wish we had more time, and maybe we will another time, but I want to get back to the question of how do we, how do I, how do you take what has been a very complex process in the past of innovation and design and bring it into something simple that our clients can use, and I say that our clients can use when those crises hit, when things are not neat. So I will leave that, but move on now to the huge fact. I put this little joke in here. You did expect that we would cover everything about design in 60 minutes, and we did not. We did not bring up the fact that Thomas Edison said it's 99% perspiration. It's a whole lot of awful work to innovate. We didn't get into the systems thinking and the huge design word of abduction. If that's new to anybody not in the design world, it's a great word. Please look it up. And so much that we didn't do here. John and Steve already had some ideas on how to deal with that, and as we close down, we'll get to hear what they're thinking. I want to put some resources up. It's the idea that there is no one design process. I picked on one that I like, that I use, that I've come to, but here are some resources. If you haven't seen these, I recommend you check out some of them, along with Nudge. Change by Design, as far as I can tell, is probably the most popular and widely read by general management, by the people who are my clients, by the bosses. It's so simple, straightforward, and it really brings it into the mainstream. Those of you who really want to get into specific different methods, check out Chris J. Jones, The Design Methods. It goes a whole lot more into depth. Or look at public television or Google Design Thinking. I think you'll have some fun. Let me say that for me, The simplest way to put it is that innovation is about connecting the bigger dots. And I claim that we as people have to be included in those dots. And so before solving any problems, I say the key, and that we OD people can be proud of, is that we know how to engage people. This session hopefully has you looking further, if you already have been, at how strategic OD and design really go well together. I call the integration of very different disciplines, I call it Leadership 4.0, and I see more and more of it. I also see a younger generation that is not going to let us get away with anything less than Leadership 4.0. And I say, it sure looks a whole lot like OD, doesn't it? So, if this is about you, the question, and I say you have to answer it yourself, are you involved in large systems innovation with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and wherever the Apple people are going, or are you involved in the massive spread of small innovation? Maybe both. Who are you engaging as designers? Do you happen to have a nice crisis that you can use as an opportunity? And of course, the end question is, who will you pull in right now? I'm going to turn the question period over to John and Steve. I want to let you know that there already is a LinkedIn discussion posted, and we're hoping to pull more of those up. We're hoping to have more engagement just in the discussion about what is innovation, what are some of the different elements that you're using that we can together work on. And my claim is that innovation is not only different than it was in the 1900s, it's different than it was in the 2000s, and that's because of us. So let me turn it over to Steve and John and let you take us through the question process, because I think this is the critical piece of this.
Yeah, well,
Thank you to all of you.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. This is a lot of good stuff. I think for the group that's in the chat room, we got a nice group out in the chat room. If you all would be willing, what's the question that you still have? What are you still curious about? I think we could have another webinar focusing in more specific. We could do a whole series on innovation and so forth. So I'd love to know what you're still curious about. What are you left hanging with or reflecting on? For you, Bruce, I'm interested in, when you talk with people and they walk out of the room, what's the question that you get asked that you still find the most perplexing for you to answer?
Actually, it came up earlier today. It's a version of what if people don't want to change? What if people don't want to unfreeze? What if they happen to be making a lot of money, hoarding a lot of power, doing quite well, thank you, with roughly the way things are, even if things are often falling apart? I see a lot of fear in people that I talk to of others unwilling to change. Now, I'd like to turn that back on myself and ask myself, in what ways am I unwilling to change? Because I suspect that, just like a lot of other people, I'm part of the problem.
Yeah, and so that's really good. Some of the folks out there are checking out and giving some of their final thoughts and key takeaways and so forth. And Roberta says, for example, in reports for the future of STEM workers in St. Louis, they are stating that communication skills are most needed. And I would just offer that that's really interesting, because most research on success says communication is like the number one element. And so, it seems like it's obvious, but what makes it, why is it obvious yet not obvious? The notion
of I really think it's important that the change world looks at communication very differently from the traditional communication world. Used to be communication is about telling, and I think we're in a world that says communication is more than anything about listening and opening up, and, as Edgar Schein says, humble inquiry. And I think that's becoming the essence.
Yeah, and I would add that there's, for those of you out there, you might be familiar with some of the conversation around dialogic OD versus diagnostic OD. and kind of
Absolutely.
is there a conflict, with this work and traditional OD, only in the sense that, and I don't think it's much a conflict as it is a polarity, but diagnosis doesn't have to go against dialogue, But I think what is shifting is the notion that dialogue is so important to appropriate good diagnosis and innovation and those kinds of things.
Yes, and in the same way, I had a client, the nuclear engineer, that they had a polarity about they wanted to rapidly increase the speed of their innovation, but the nuclear engineers didn't want to blow up a city while testing things. And what they came to is that the fact that it's a both and. The engineers agreed they could actually slow down the development of the nuclear pieces, make them safer, while at the same time making the whole process much faster by speeding up the things that aren't going to blow up a city.
Right on. And a couple things in the chat. One is Tree. Tree is here and she's done a lot of work with this Groupworks. It's a deck and it's a learning tool, and you can find a lot about that in the chat room. You can look up Groupworks, a pattern language for bringing life to meetings and other gatherings. You can do a quick search on that and find that resource. That's a good one out there to kind of to support innovative dialogue and exploration. And Dr. Lin said, do you see any risk or downside to merging design and OD and caveats? That might be that might be more of a later question, because I think we're at wrapping up. And Dr. Lin always has really insightful thoughts and adds a lot to our discussions. And let's see here.
And John in the GoToWebinar control panel said that he was always taught that diagnosis only happens through stakeholder dialogue, so he doesn't see a conflict with traditional OD.
It would be a wonderful debate to have.
Yeah, I would only say, and I would just, this is another thing is, and I do agree with that. That's my personal bent. I'm right there with you on that. That there are people who see Diagnostic OD as a group of smart experts in organization development. Go and do surveys, do some interviews, collect the data, compile the data, and come back and give a report to the client saying, this is what you need to change and why, and this is OD, and this is how you go about changing it. So the notion of a diagnosis by a small group who interprets the data, reports it back, and provides recommendations to improve organizational performance. Sometimes there's a group there is a group of people that see that as traditional OD. I feel that the dialogue process built into that, while it may take longer, is so much more important. And so I think that's where there might be some differentiations or delineations that we could discuss later, possibly.
And I'm sorry to say, I still see that example being widely practiced, of the small group interpreting what the large group said. And I think that's a problem we face. To me, it's a problem. So I'm putting my stake in the ground on that one.
Yeah, and Katie says she appreciates the engage, explore, test, a simple way to describe design and talk about it with others. Dr. Lin mentions she asks lots of questions very appreciatively, and that opens thinking. And let's see here. I think that's about it. John, anything else you want to add, and we can say goodbye?
Yeah, just on the last slide, the NEXUS slide that I brought up first. Thank you, Bruce, for a great presentation. Thanks, Steve, for helping facilitate and being present. Thank you for everybody in the chat room for sharing your insights and ideas. Join us on LinkedIn. These slides that Bruce went through and our NEXUS slides will be sent to you along with a recording of the session, and it'll be a Google folder link. It'll also have an email in that email from GoToWebinar, events@nexusforchange.org. If you guys have any issues, just email us there, and I will get back to you right away with a link or some documentation for that. And then take the survey from GoToWebinar. So when you close out, it'll ask if you want to take the survey. Go ahead and take the survey. Give Bruce some feedback on how the presentation went, and give us some ideas on some things that you guys would like to hear about. I'm putting the LinkedIn. I already sent the LinkedIn link out to everybody in the GoToWebinar control panel. I'm also sending it now through the Chatzy. and it'll also be embedded on this PowerPoint that you'll get in your email. So go ahead and click on that LinkedIn, follow us on LinkedIn, and join the conversation that Bruce, Steve, and I will continue to facilitate on this. And perhaps we'll get a smaller session out of it, or we will come up with another innovative webinar that everybody can join.
Awesome. Thanks, Bruce. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Steve.
And have a great day, everybody. We'll be talking with you soon.
Great.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye now.